In today's episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast, we're going to be talking with Jimmy Moore, author of the book Living La Vida Low Carb, as well as 21 life lessons from Living La Vida Low Carb and cholesterol clarity. He's done a ton of things, hosts of a number of podcasts. He's got an incredible story. So, Jimmy, first off, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Hey Travis, you're definitely doing a blast from the past with that first couple of books that you listed because
Yeah.
I don't even talk about the first one anymore. It was just so horrible. It was so long ago. But yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show. And yeah, people in their 20s. I wish I knew this stuff when I was in my 20s, man.
Yeah. So, let's start off. Can you tell us a little bit about your story? Because you have a very powerful story.
Yeah, thank you. I grew up pretty typical American kid. My mom was a single mom with three kids and two very hungry boys. And so she was a single mom on a single income. What did we eat? It's what I now affectionately refer to as crappy garbage. So Fruit Loops and Ding Dongs and Ho Hos and Coca-Cola and Doritos potato chips. I mean, you name it, we were basically stuffing it down our pie hole. And so that's how I got to be obese. And at my apex, right around the age of 32, I weighed 410 pounds. Most of that I packed on in my 20s. So I'm really happy to hear, Travis, that you're basically talking directly to that millennial generation, that you're at the age now where the rest of your life and your health is going to be dependent on what happens right now in your life. And you might not think about 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s down the road, but 20s is when it all can unravel or can all go in the right direction. So thank you for your podcast. But that's what happened for me. I went to college. I would eat whole pizzas. I would do all the stuff college people do, packed on the pounds. And I think when I graduated high school, I was somewhere around 220 pounds. And by the end of my 20s, I was pushing 400 pounds. And so there I was at the age of 32, 410 pounds, and I get a diet book for Christmas. Diet book, yes, for Christmas. Guess from who? My mother-in-law. So those
Oh,
of you who are married, that's a precarious relationship there. And I didn't have a great one at the time with my mother-in-law. And she was always giving me diet books for Christmas. I'm like, gee, thanks, Mom. Yes, I'm fat. Thank you. Uh, and so she gave me one this particular year in 2003 that totally rocked my world, changed my life forever. And it's why I'm talking to you here today. It was called Dr. Atkins' New Diet Revolution. And so people are like, oh, the Atkins diet. And so I had tried every diet known to mankind over the years. One of the misconceptions about obese people is, well, why don't they just do something? Well, I had tried everything, literally almost everything in the book when it comes to dieting. And of course, most of those things are predicated on low fat diets, taking diet pills, following this program, this food, that food restriction, and hunger tends to be kind of the common theme amongst most of them. And you just have to put up with that because you're fat and that's what you do. Well, I start reading this Dr. Atkins book and it's unlike anything I'd ever read before. Eat less carbohydrates. And I'm going, whoa, whoa, whoa. How are you supposed to have any energy if you're not eating a lot of carbohydrates in your diet? Isn't that the basis for brain health and energy? That's what we believed. And so I'm reading this and going, okay, this goes against the grain, all pun intended. And then eat more fat. This guy is a cardiologist and he's telling people to eat the very substance that we know clogs your arteries, gives you heart disease, and will make you keel over of a heart attack. Those are the things that people have always believed. And I'm sure people listening to me talk right now go, yep, that's what the Atkins diet will do to you. You're going to get a heart attack. You're going to be lethargic, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, you know what? I have tried all of these other things. And I had gotten to the point, Travis, just a few years before that, where I had my kind of last ditch effort that I was going to do something about my weight and health. And it was a low fat diet, of course. And at the end of it, when I crashed and burned as predicted, I said, you know what, if that's the way I have to eat for the rest of my life to be healthy, I would rather be happy and fat and unhealthy than to have to eat that way just to be healthy. And that was a really dangerous situation to be in. But thank God for my mother-in-law, because she gave me that book and it totally rocked my world. I read it between Christmas and New Year's, started on January 1st, 2004. It's hard to believe it's been 13 years almost since I started this journey. And I went on it right away, by the book, lost 30 pounds in the first month. And then I was a very svelte 380 pounds at that point and had such energy coming out the wazoo that I had to go to the gym. So I start working out. And when I say working out as a 380 pounder, I tell people I was lifting weights. I was on the treadmill at 3 miles an hour for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, anybody that does any kind of cardio knows that's extremely slow and very short. But when you're 380 pounds and you're carrying all that weight, I was weightlifting. This whole body on my legs are very muscular, by the way. So I did that, lost another 40 pounds in the second month. And by the end of 100 days, I lost 100 pounds. And I was like, there is something to this thing. And so ultimately, by the end of that year, I did lose a total of 180 pounds and got the attention of the Atkins people. They wrote me and said, hey, let's share your story on our website. I'm like, who are you people? I didn't know who they were. And so they featured my story on the front of their website at the end of 2004. And I started getting all these messages from people. How'd you do it? How'd you do it? Where's your book? Where's your blog? And I'm going, will you people leave me alone? So then I basically parlayed this success into a new career, really. And so my new career started with a blog that I affectionately called Living La Vida Low Carb. And 1 year later started a podcast called The Living La Vida Low Carb Show, which is now the longest running health podcast on the internet. Almost 1,200 episodes of that show. And Travis, you've got the podcasting bug now. So once you do one podcast, you want to do a million podcasts. So,
Yep.
so I not only go on other people's shows like yours here today, but I have several other podcasts about ketogenic diets. One that's new that's coming out in January on fasting. I've done various kinds of podcasts and just love it. And 2012 got a major book deal with a Simon & Schuster imprint publisher. And they basically said, you can write books for us for the rest of your life.
Wow.
So it's a cool gig.
Yeah. So one of the first questions I have is, what is the difference between the ketogenic diet and the Atkins diet? Because I kind of
What
hear
a
those.
great
Yeah.
question. Yeah, what a great question. We actually addressed this in my book, Keto Clarity, Chapter 2. We answered that very question. But in a nutshell, the Atkins diet, here's Atkins in a nutshell. Keep your carbs at 20 grams to start and then raise them at 5-gram increments weekly until you reach your carbohydrate tolerance level. That's basically, from the carb perspective, what the Atkins diet was. And then he said, eat unlimited amounts of fat and protein. So he got it right on, spot on when it came to the carbohydrate. But the thing that he got wrong was he said unlimited fat and protein. So what did our fat phobic society do with that information, Travis? They said, oh, well, we know fat is unhealthy, so let's eat the protein with the low carb, and that's the Atkins diet. Well, unfortunately, that was not the Atkins diet. That was not what he intended, but he didn't realize the powerful propagandizing that we've had with fat. And of course, you're at the age, the people that you're talking to, maybe you guys are more skeptical about it, but my generation, Generation X, we bought into it hook, line, and sinker because we were basically propagandized as children. In the schools, they would say, fat's going to give you all these problems. You need to have, 8 to 12 servings of grains a day. All of these things were taught. I don't know if they still teach that in schools, but they sure did back in the 1980s when I was a kid. And so I think Atkins got it dead wrong about one aspect of his diet, and here's what it was. He didn't warn people about the negative effects of too much protein. Yes, you heard me right. Too much protein. So what happens is people eat chicken breast with broccoli, and they say that's a good low-carb Atkins meal. Okay, it may be a good low-carb meal because there's very few carbohydrates in there, but you're still getting sugar from the excess protein, and it's highly lacking in fat. So a ketogenic diet is one that's not only low in carbohydrate, that is the basis, but it's moderated in protein and it's high fat. So fat is basically your fuel source. You're shifting over to a high fat diet. Now that scares people because, again, all the imagery we have about dietary fat and how it clogs your arteries, none of that's true, by the way, and we can definitely get into that. But that's the main difference. It's the protein gets moderated down and you're replacing those calories that you used to eat with protein and carbohydrate with now eating more fat. So when I say fat, I'm talking about real food sources of fat: coconut oil, butter, lard, full fat meats and cheeses, cream, that kind of thing. So that's what you're doing. You're shifting your body over into a state of ketosis where you're producing ketones. Now, the Atkins diet could have been a ketogenic diet for some people, but because of the high variability between individuals, some people they needed the more fat and the moderate protein in order to produce ketones and to get the effects that would come from being what's called in a state of ketosis or keto adapted. So it's going to vary from person to person, and that's what makes this so difficult for people. "Oh, I eat Atkins and I get great ketones." Well, good. It means your body's probably not as broken as the next person, but someone else may need to do a little more significant nutritional ketosis and or even periods of fasting in order to get those same levels of ketones in their own body for the therapeutic effects. So I'm going to stop talking now so you can ask another question.
Yeah, okay. So my next question is, what would a daily menu of this look like? What would a breakfast, what would, lunch, dinner? I don't know if you eat just 3 meals a day or if you do 6 meals. So that's basically like what would it look
Yeah.
like if someone wants to do this?
Oh my goodness. You're hitting on a hot button here because our culture has so hammered into our heads that we should eat breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, midnight snack. I mean, we're constantly eating. In fact, Taco Bell had a whole commercial series a few years back calling the midnight snack the fourth meal.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, Taco Bell, I don't even eat the first couple of meals that you say. So I think it's again going to vary. I think it's very difficult to say, well, you should eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and have these as snack. I think you put people in a box when you do that because some people tend to do better when they do something called intermittent fasting and the benefits that come from that. So let's just look at the word breakfast. People say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and I agree with them. I just don't think it has to necessarily be at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Hmm.
You could have your break fast at, say, noon or 1. So let's say your last meal of the day is at 6 o'clock the night before. Of course, you sleep, and that's a fasting period. You wake up in the morning and you're not really hungry. Guess what? You don't have to eat just because it's breakfast time. Wait until noon, 1, whenever your lunch break is, and then eat. And you've allowed your body, allowed your pancreas to have a rest. And you're able to go a pretty good, maybe 18 hours between meals. That is incredibly healthy for you. And the beautiful thing about a ketogenic approach is the foods are so satiating, especially the fat, that you don't feel like you have to eat as often. Now, what that means is when you do eat those 1 or 2 meals, and yes, you heard me right, I eat about 1 to 2 meals a day. Those 1 or 2 meals probably should have pretty substantive amounts of calories because that's all of your nutrition for the entire day. And so you asked frequency. Did you ask specific food?
Yeah, that's something I'm definitely interested in, specific
Okay,
foods.
so frequency for me tends to be, if I wake up in the morning and I'm not hungry, I'm not eating. It's not rocket science here. So don't feel like you have to eat just because it's the clock tells you it's time to eat. So let's say that noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon comes around. Okay, I'm hungry. I'm feeling a little bit peckish. Let's eat a little something. So I'll get a grass-fed beef burger, a steak. But we're not talking about like a 12-ounce ribeye. We're talking maybe a 6-ounce sirloin. Again, moderating down on that protein so you're not getting too much. Of course, you can cook it in butters so that's got fat in it. You can throw an avocado in there. Avocado is a great monounsaturated healthy fat. And then you could add sour cream or cheese to the burger as more sources of added fat. Of course, green leafy vegetables all day, every day. You can have that on a ketogenic diet. Surprise, surprise. Yes, you do eat vegetables. You can also have green, like broccoli, cauliflower. You can have that, green beans, pretty much any non-starchy green leafy vegetable. And you can cook those in butter if you'd like. And that's a meal. I mean, it's not really difficult when you start looking at these things from that perspective. Now, of course, breakfast food is extraordinarily easy to make ketogenic. So we've got chickens in our backyard and they provide us some beautiful, delicious, fresh eggs. And it's just so awesome to go back there, grab some eggs, and then go right to the pan and put them in there, and grass-fed butter, coconut oil. Ooh la la, it's awesome. So you can have that with some avocado, maybe some bacon or sausage with that. And if you want some vegetables, you can make like a little omelet that you could throw in onions and whatever you put in there, as long, again, as it's non-starchy and green leafy vegetables. So it's not really difficult to eat this way. It's just a matter of, wrapping your head around the fat is not going to harm you. And once you do that, you embrace the fat, embrace the dark side. It's going to be incredible for your health.
So one of the things that I mean, there's only, I hate to say this because I'm sure you can totally prove me wrong, but there seems to only be so many sources of healthy or just fats in general. How do you feel about like nuts and seeds?
Oh, yeah, nuts and seeds are totally fine. The thing is, a lot of people mistake peanuts
Hmm.
as a nut.
No, yeah.
Peanuts are a legume, and so legumes are off limits, and part not so much just because of the carbohydrate content in most legumes, although peanuts do have a lower carbohydrate count. But choose real nuts. There's definitely almonds are out there. I love raw almonds. I never realized almonds were sweet until I stopped eating sugar and went
Hmm.
ketogenic, and I'm going, wow, those are sweet. And then macadamia nuts have a lot of fat in them, very moderate in protein, and 1 gram of carbohydrates. So macadamia nuts are on there. There's this new nut that's been out there for the past couple of years that I just found out about, called pili nuts, Pili. And so pili nuts have the most fat of any nut. 1 ounce serving has 23 grams of fat, something like 6 or 7 grams of protein, and less than 1 gram of carbohydrate. So it's definitely the perfect ketogenic nut. Pili nuts, Pili nuts. So that's a good one. So, and then seeds, of course, sunflower seeds. The only thing about these nuts, though, is you have to be careful if they roast them. A lot of times they'll roast them in a fat that's not so healthy.
Mm.
So cottonseed oil tends to be used. Soybean oil tends to be used to roast almonds, for example. And of course, any flavored nut is going to have sugar added to it as well, maybe a little bit of grain. So I avoid those. I try to get raw whenever possible. So read your labels voraciously so you don't accidentally get some bad oils into your system.
Absolutely. And we talked a little bit about intermittent fasting. What is your stance on longer term fasting? How do you feel about that?
I wrote a whole book about it. It's called The Complete Guide to Fasting. So I actually just a few weeks back finished up a 21-day fast. It was about
Wow.
how many, Christine, have I done? Maybe 4 of those in the past year. Yeah, Christine's my wife I'm talking to over here. So yeah, I just finished 21 days. And in that 21 days, I had 1 cup of bone broth with sea salt. I had 2 meals. So at the end of day 12, I paused the fast, had a meal, got right back on the fast again. And at the end of day, I believe it was day 18, I paused the fast and got back on. But other than those 2 meals and that 1 cup of bone broth with sea salt, all I had pretty much was liquid, no calories, nothing. 21 days. So how did I get there? Well, let's back up to why I wrote the book. So I met this gentleman in Cape Town, South Africa, back in February of 2015. He and I shared the stage together at a low-carb, high-fat conference in Cape Town, South Africa. His name, Dr. Jason Fung. And so I heard him talking about fasting. And of course, I've been interested for many years in fasting, having interviewed many of the world's experts in it on my show. And I said, I've been interested in doing these longer fasts. Let me talk to this guy, see if I can find a resource to learn more about it to maybe try to do these. And I went up to him and I said, hey, is there any book out there I could reference about doing a fast for more than, like a day or two? He said, no, there's really nothing out there that's going to help
Hmm.
you. I said, well, let's write that book.
Yeah.
So that's how the book came about. And I said, well, if I'm going to write a book with you about this, maybe I need to try some of these longer fasts for myself, because he has a clinic. He's a nephrologist in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And he has a clinic where he's put well over 1,000 patients on some form of a fasting protocol, everywhere from intermittent fasting of just a few hours, all the way. The longest one he's ever put somebody on is 200 days in
Wow.
a row. And so that boy was in bad shape. He was about to have limbs amputated. And so he had to get his insulin down. He had to do something pretty drastic. And so 200 days of not eating is pretty drastic. So he did that. But I said, you know what? I want to try to do a 21-day fast. Now, the longest I had ever gone was just under a week. I almost made it a full week. On day 7, I was trying to do a 1-week fast. And on day 7, I went to church that day and I had communion after not eating for 6.5 days. Word to the wise, don't ever do that. Because people don't know what communion is. It's like a little wafer cracker and it's a little cup of grape juice. And so I had hypoglycemia so bad, my wife Christine thought I was dying, and it felt like I was dying because you're not supposed to do that when you're fasting. So anyway, lesson learned. So I tried this 21-day fast in September last year, 2015, and I make it 17 and a half days in a row. Now, keep in mind, Dr. Fung said it was totally fine to use bone broth with sea salt, to use maybe something like kombucha, during this. And I did. And I'm glad that I did, because it's kind of like when you start learning to ride a bicycle, you don't start flying down the hills right away, do you? You have to kind of stumble a little bit, maybe scrape your knee a few times before you get the hang of it. And then you're like popping wheelies and doing all the weird stuff that we do on bicycles when we're kids. So that's kind of the way I see learning how to do fasting, is you're kind of working up to get to that level where it's a lot easier. And now that I've done 4 or 5 of these longer fasts, I've found that it's gotten a lot easier. I kind of know what to expect. I know day 1's probably cool because I'm used to intermittent fasting. I know day 2 is hell. So I prepare for that and realize day 2 is going to be difficult. But then I know day 3, 4, 5, and beyond is all going to be nirvana,
Hmm.
because I've experienced it before. So it's kind of one of those things of, once you've done it and you want to do it again, because it's awesome.
Wow. Jimmy, really just quick as a side note,
Yep.
I know I only had you booked. I have plenty of time, but I want to be respectful of your time. I
You're
only
good,
had you.
man. I have nothing else today. So if you need to go another half hour, that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I got a ton of questions, but I'll obviously
Please
be
fire
respectful.
away, man.
So, okay. One of my questions for you is, what mistakes do you see? Let's go back to the ketogenic diet, but what mistakes do you see people making over and over again?
In ketosis,
Yeah.
the main thing is too much protein, because they got the carbs down. And even the people that don't have their carbs down, one of the mistakes that they make is they count this thing called net carbs. So net carbs is a trap. It's a trap. Run, uh, because the people say, well, it has X amount of fiber, and I can just subtract all of that fiber from that total carbohydrate to give me my net carbs. A lot of the food companies have latched onto that. And 5 net effective carbs. There was a big scam out there a couple of years ago called Dreamfields pasta that claimed that 5 net effective carbs, and yet you look on the label and it says 38 grams of carbs per serving. Well, they're subtracting a whole lot of quote fiber that unfortunately was still raising the blood sugar. I actually tested that one for myself, and it was spiking my blood sugar immensely as if it was regular pasta. So you have to be real careful about how you count carbs. So what we said in Keto Clarity was count total carbohydrate. It's really the only surefire way of knowing what your carb tolerance is. Now, let's be honest here. Fiber does indeed rise your blood sugar a lot slower than another carbohydrate, especially the refined kind, but it still raises it. And so you have to be very careful about that. And the best way to be careful is just count all the carbs. That's just the best way to stay honest about it. But the protein is another one that's kind of a sliding scale because some people could get away with, if you're really an elite athlete and, really working out hard, a CrossFit or whatever you're doing, and you're eating 150, 200 grams of protein, you probably need it and you're using that, within your protocol. But if you're a middle-aged, somewhat slothful person and you're not really doing a lot of exercise in your regular routine, you don't need as much protein as you think you do. And so moderating down on that protein, not eating, a chicken breast, rib, broccoli, like we talked about earlier, it's a good low carb meal, but it's going to make you hungry in a few hours because it's not enough fat. And you're doing this big long G word. So the big long G word is gluconeogenesis. It kicks in so that your blood sugar actually will rise even though you're not eating carbohydrates. Some people say, well, how can my blood sugar go up if I'm not eating a lot of carbs? It's the protein. And so moderating down on that protein makes the blood sugar come down, makes the ketones go up, and you get the benefits that we talk about with ketosis. And so those are probably the two main mistakes that I see. And then the last thing I'll say about mistakes is people think it's all about the diet. And diet is definitely a big part of it. But if you're not sleeping well, if you're stressed, if you've got some kind of a gut health issue, if you've got hormones that are out of balance, dude or dudette, you got to get those things under control because no diet in the world is going to overcome these lifestyle issues. You just got to get those under control before you start blaming ketogenic not working.
Gotcha. And I've heard of the cyclical ketogenic diet as well. And
Yeah.
my understanding of that is, every once a week or something, you're allowed to have carbs. Are you strictly just ketogenic, or do you do the cyclical nature to it?
So me personally, I can't do cyclical. I have heard some athlete friends of mine that do ketosis and then have the one meal or one day or one weekend where they have the carbs. The purpose of that is to basically reload and refuel your glycogen stores. And so the problem with that though is it assumes that you need to do that. And a lot of the research that we're seeing coming out now is showing that you don't really need to do that because once you've shifted your body over from being a sugar burner, which is mainly eating carbohydrates as your source of nutrition, glucose is fueling you, over to being a fat burner, which the byproduct of the fat burning is ketones. Those ketones, after about a 4 to 8 week period, become your primary fuel source. So if you start suddenly introducing these carbohydrates on a once a week basis, you never truly get keto adapted and you never truly are able to tap into the full energy source that is your fat stores. When you're a sugar burner, you only have about 2,000 calories worth of energy at your disposal before you have to refuel. It's why you see these marathon runners squirting this disgusting goo into their mouth while they're running. Well, they do that because they're sugar burners, and once they burn up all that 2,000 calories, which ain't much when you're running, you got to refuel. But guess how many calories worth of energy you have at your disposal if you're a lean person? Let's say an athlete who's 8% body fat. Guess how many calories worth of fat they have on their body at their disposal at any given time? Do you know?
I don't know. I know a lot more, is my
A
guess.
lot more indeed. 20 times more to the tune of 40,000 plus calories. So 2,000 versus 40,000 calories worth of energy. I don't know about you, Travis, and I didn't do real well in math in school, but 40,000 is greater than 2,000 all day, every day. And I think, that alone should make athletes, stand up and go, whoa, maybe I should skip that carb night. I think is what some people call that cyclical ketogenic where you're having the one meal. Maybe you give this a go for 90 100 days where you're just full on ketogenic, because I think once you get past that 4 to 8 week period of adaptation, you're going to be amazed at how many PRs you're going to make, and you're not having very many carbohydrates at all.
Hmm. So if someone wanted to, let's say they're inspired by this podcast and they want to start today or tomorrow to actually go full into ketosis,
Yep.
what advice or recommendations would you have for them?
Well, it's a little self-aggrandizing, but please read Keto Clarity because I wrote it as a layperson who has interviewed literally everybody in this space. so that it would be easy to understand. Because sometimes this stuff can get a little bit complex, Travis, and people, their eyes start glazing over. And maybe some people listening to me now, oh boy, what's he talking about? Gluconia, what? And so, and so read the book because we make it very, very easy to understand. But it also has lots of science in there. I have 24 experts that I interviewed for the book that are all the leading experts in ketosis around the world. Of course, my co-author, Dr. Eric Westman, is one of the premier researchers into ketogenic diets as well. So that's a good starting point. But just start it. I think that's the thing. Sometimes people are like, well, I'll start it Monday. I'll start it January 1st. No, start today. Start now. And the main thing you can do is just get rid of all the crappy garbage in your cupboard. You've got those pretzels up there. You've got popcorn. You got, all these starchy foods that you probably don't need to be consuming. Get rid of them out of your house. That's a great starting point. Get real food in your house. So green leafy vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, grass-fed meats, raw cheese if you can get it, and cream, and all of these foods that are going to nourish your body. I did do a cookbook as well called the Ketogenic Cookbook if you need recipe ideas, but pretty much I'm a meat and vegetable, eggs, butter kind of guy.
I want to shift gears here a little bit and talk about how obviously you got started with your blog because people were coming to you for advice, and
Yep.
my audience is very much into wanting to start podcasts, wanting to start blogs. I believe you do some stuff on YouTube as well, a little bit.
I've done everything, dude. I do Periscope primarily. I'm not a Snapchatter, although I do love doing the filters for my wife. They're hilarious. But yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere online. Yep.
So if someone wanted to, because we all obviously have passions, and this was a really big one for you, obviously because you
Yes.
were able to help people. So I guess my question to you would be, if someone in this day and age, it was a little bit different when you started, obviously with the blog, but
A
if someone
lot
in this,
different.
yeah, if someone wanted to start right now, they have a passion and they think they can help people, would you recommend they start with a podcast, with a blog, a YouTube channel, Periscope? How would they get started?
Well, back in the good old days, we used to. Oh, sorry. So, what I often tell people in talks that I give when they ask a question like this is I always say, what are you good at? Are you good at writing? You need to blog. You need to write ebooks. You need to write books. Are you good at talking? Then you need to be behind the microphone doing a podcast. If you're not camera shy, in front of a camera, doing Periscope, doing YouTube videos, whatever. I think whatever your talent is, that's what you should gravitate to. I think sometimes we try to put people in a box and, well, everybody should blog, everybody should podcast. No, everybody shouldn't. There's some people podcasting right now. You do not need to be on the air. Please stop. But there are others of you who do have a voice and a great voice to talk on the radio, and you should do it. And I think that's the thing. I think that I didn't believe in myself when I first started. When I started the blog, I was an English nerd. I mean, a major in college, and and so writing was very easy for me. But when the guy contacted me, who's still my producer on my podcast, he contacted me and he said, "Hey, if you talk half as good as you write, you should be a podcaster." And I'm like, I don't really have anything in this. I did a little bit of Christian radio back in the 90s when I was in college, and that was Michael W. Smith. Now here's Amy Grant. That was all I did. And now I professionally interview people for a living. So sometimes maybe take a chance. If you feel like you've got a passion, you feel like you've got a voice, you feel like you really want to get it out there, somehow, some way, the skill will develop. I mean, I've done 1,200 episodes of the Living La Vida Low Carb show. That's on the job training there, man. So, so the encouragement to your audience that wants to do this is find your voice, find who you are, find your niche. Don't just start it for starting its sake, and don't say you'll start it and then not be consistent. If you're not consistent, and I'm talking to you too, Travis, if you're not consistent in your content, don't bother because your listeners won't stay with you. The only reason my listeners have stayed with me for nearly 12, 13 years now is I give them consistent content that's quality and it will be out there forever and ever. Amen. And they know I'm a trusted resource because they've heard me for years. And in order for you to get on there for years and have that following for years, you have to develop those early years. That first year or two, the first 50, 100, 150, 200 episodes of your podcast, if you decide to podcast, is so critical because if you don't connect then, you ain't going to connect.
And with your blog, so how did you get the word out? Because it's one thing to write great
Right.
content, getting the word out is critical. How did you do that?
Well, today it's a whole lot easier than when I started.
Yeah.
2005, it was nobody. I mean, you basically went on this thing called a forum. And so hey, I'm a blogger. Come see my blog, Living La Vida Low Carb. And it was a little bit more difficult. These days, if you set up XYZ podcast or XYZ blog, you go onto Twitter and XYZ blog at XYZ blog on Instagram, instagram.com/XYZ blog. And you can get your name out there very quickly, especially if you chime in on other people that are popular. And I get people that do that with me all the time. Will you talk about me? And so I can and I'm happy to do that and help get the word out for people that I think are doing really good work. And so it's just a slow process of getting your name out there. And then if you're providing good content that's unique, and I think the secret sauce to my success has been I've never tried to pretend to be anybody but Jimmy Moore. Sometimes people get online and they're so inauthentic, Travis, where they try to be a persona. Well, people expect me to be X, and so I'm going to be X. And no, I think they love authenticity. And so when you're real and you just put yourself out there raw and all, those are the people that tend to be the most successful in this space.
So I have one more question for you before we wrap up, and this is more of a general question. So obviously my audience are all in their 20s, and what advice would you give to someone in their 20s? And it doesn't necessarily have to be about diet, health. It could
Mhm.
be as general as you want it to be, but what advice would you give to them?
Oh my goodness. If I could slap 20-year-old Jimmy Moore in the head, I would have. Just realize that, and I said this a little bit earlier, that what you're doing now in your 20s is laying the basis for the rest of your life. Now that seems extreme. Well, I'm 20, I don't have to really think about real world things till I'm, 40 something. By the time you're 40 something, your health may be in shambles. Your career may not be where you think it should be, especially if you're a college student right now and you're listening to this, well, I'm majoring in, political science and want to go work, on Capitol Hill, blah, blah, blah. That was my dream 25 years ago. And here I am 25 years later, not even using that degree. So I wish, in hindsight, I had paid more attention to my health and paid more attention to a lot of the things that I care about now. But just know that the plans that you have in your mind right now in your 20s, they're going to shift. And that's okay. I think being willing to shift, and this is the thing I do admire about the millennial generation, is I think you guys are more adventurous and more willing to shift and question everything than my generation was, and definitely my mom and dad's generation. We were always kind of followers, and millennials tend to be leaders. And so be the leader, step out of your comfort zone sometimes, do things that you're not real sure you're qualified to do. And I think you're going to be successful when you do reach 30s, 40s, 50s.
Great advice. And obviously, we named a lot of different places people can find out more about you. But if there was one place for people to start, any recommendations on how they can find out more about you and what you do?
Oh yeah, I'm real easy to find. The millennial generation will love this. Just Google Jimmy Moore, and the first 2 pages is all my stuff. So that's pretty cool. That's what happens when you've been online for a million years. You just Google my name, and it's there. There is one guy that's like an opera singer named Jimmy Moore, and you go on his website, and he goes, oh, and I'm like, okay, that's not me. I'm also at livinlavidalowcarb.com.
Perfect. Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. And if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter. And I release a new video every Monday. And by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it, subscribe, like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.